And the difference, of course, between Caesar and Pompey at this point is that Pompey had supported the status quo, where Caesar has always stood for its overthrow.
Tension fills the city. The conservatives try to convince Pompey to break with Caesar. Too late. His new wife, Caesar's daughter, Julia, has completely beguiled the great general.
Pompey was so in love with his teenage bride that he began neglecting politics so he could spend all his time with her. Pompey took his teenage love on constant tours to visit all the most beautiful gardens and parks in Italy.
Pompey's generosity to Caesar even includes a member of his extended family. His protege, Marcus Brutus. As a favor, Pompey grants Brutus a lucrative post in one of the eastern provinces, allowing the young noble to rise in the political ranks, just like his mentor. With Pompey protecting Caesar's interests in Rome, Caesar turns his attention to rumors of invasion from the Gallic kingdom of Aedui. It is a quiet and pastoral region, unaccustomed to violence. Aedui.
Most people, most of the time, were not involved in military activity. Most people spent most of their time farming, building their houses, making clothing, raising their children, and so on.
In 58 BC, peace is shattered when Caesar reports that tens of thousands of barbarian warriors flood into Aedui, led by the terrifying warlord Ariovistus.
Ariovistus becomes virtually a Saddam Hussein figure in the Roman imagination. He's virtually equipped with weapons of mass destruction in Roman terms. He's got this terrible, violent army that is, again, evocative of the barbarian leaders of earlier generations. He is rumored to be oppressing Rome's allies, left, right, and center, to be, in that way, directly attacking the prestige of Rome.
Such aggression, according to Caesar, must not be tolerated. Caesar learns that Ariovistus plans to set up his base in the fortified town of Besancon. Swiftly, Caesar marches his men across Gaul to meet them. The renowned classical biographer Plutarch.
The whole army clamored for the fight as the men followed Caesar to their camp just 20 miles from the enemy.
With the Roman legions closing in, the barbarians looked to their pagan gods for guidance.
The German army of Ariovistus, like every ancient army, had priests and seers and shamans, in this case women, who were believed to have the ability to communicate with the gods. When the time for battle came, then the priests, the seers, the soothsayers would be asked, do the gods say that it's not prohibited for us to fight now?
Weapons, water, the movement of the stars, all may bear messages from the gods. Through their totems, the soothsayers divine that Ariovistus will not win if he fights before the new moon. He must not move until then. It is the kind of intelligence upon which whole battles hinge, and it finds its way to Caesar's ear.
Ancient peoples took these difficult to understand messages from the gods very, very seriously. Caesar knows that if he can force the barbarians into battle when they think the gods are telling them not to fight, that he will have a great psychological advantage.
With the gods themselves seeming to lay his path, Caesar seizes the moment.
Caesar sends his forces right up to the German fortification, threatening them and shaming them, and forcing, finally, against his will, Ariovistus to bring his troops out when they're going to be fighting with this dread in the back of their minds. We shouldn't be doing this, but the gods have told us not to go against Caesar.
Caesar presses his advantage and attacks.
Caesar has no compunction about getting rid of vast numbers of people. So in the battle with Ariovistus, he boasts that he killed 80,000 Germans, including 2 of his wives and 1 of Ariovistus' daughters. The other one he captured.
Ariovistus himself manages to escape and flees to Germany, leaving Caesar as the new master of Gaul. In 58 BC, Julius Caesar slaughters tens of thousands of violent German warriors. Their leader, Ariovistus, flees in dishonor, releasing the Germans' hold on Gaul. Now, as he has planned all along, Caesar has a free hand to annex the kingdoms of Gaul himself. He claims to come as a liberator, but some do not welcome Roman rule.
The principal downside was that you lost your political independence. And that might not have mattered to some of these elites. The leaders in particular got all sorts of political and material benefits. But as we know from later circumstances in Rome and elsewhere, lots of peoples don't like being ruled by outsiders.
Over the next 3 years, Caesar drops his pose of protector. Not only does he conquer Gallic tribes to the north and west, but he also crosses the Rhine and the Channel to invade Germany and Britain, the first Roman to do so. In a combination of self-promotion and newscast, Caesar sends back the story of his conquest in action-packed dispatches.
Though surrounded by thousands of natives, my men defended themselves with the utmost bravery for over 4 hours. They killed a number of Britons at the cost of only a few men wounded. As soon as our cavalry came in sight, the enemy threw down their arms and fled, suffering very heavy casualties.
It's like he sucks you along into his campaign with him. They read for the Romans like an adventure story, a story of exploration, because Romans had not been to northern Gaul. Romans had not been to Britain. So for the Romans in particular, it would have been a very exciting story.
Caesar's account is one of the most remarkable political documents to survive from any age in the history of the world. It's intended to justify actions that many Romans regarded as completely illegal and outrageous, and only justified by their success.
Even Caesar's protege, Marcus Brutus, studies the dispatches with growing concern. In between Caesar's eloquent lines, he perceives greed and overreaching ambition.
All of a sudden, people begin to realize Caesar's gathering enormous wealth, an enormously powerful army behind him. He's spending a lot of money buying support throughout the Italian peninsula.
Brutus is troubled and concerned for his political position. A more powerful Caesar means a less powerful aristocracy. Conservative leaders vow to stop Caesar.
What the Roman upper class fears most of all will be that one of its members will break ranks and go directly to the people without the consensus of the governing class behind him. They were always afraid that somebody might do something to upset the status quo, which was entirely devoted to maintaining their wealth and position.
To stop the growing challenge, Caesar must call in a favor from his longtime ally, Crassus. He alone does not fear Caesar's booming popularity. His own enormous wealth insulates him from the vacillation of politics. With bribes and guile, he manages to block Caesar's enemies and win for himself another consulship and his first military command in nearly 20 years. Dreaming of lasting glory, Crassus heads east to invade the kingdom of Parthia, only to die in an ambush. Caesar has lost his first protector in Rome. Around the same time, Caesar's only daughter, Julia, dies in childbirth. Her husband, Pompey, Caesar's last protector, is devastated.
The baby died a couple of days later. Pompey was distraught, and the loss of his love and of his child from his young wife destroyed his alliance with Caesar. His emotions overcame him, and Pompey broke with Caesar.
The triumvirate is finished. Pompey and Caesar are now enemies. The die is cast for an ultimate showdown. As political terror increases, the supporters of the two titans riot in the streets, each side determined to destroy the other.
Rome was in political turmoil. Violence had become the norm in politics. There were street gangs fighting each other in political campaigns.
In the mayhem, the Senate building, the very home of Roman government, burns to the ground. The situation in Rome is desperate. Back in Gaul, the situation is turning dangerous for Caesar as well. A charismatic Gallic leader named Vercingetorix rallies the Gauls to unite against the Romans from his homeland of Auvergne. Vercingetorix's plan is radical. Burn all the supplies, every last barn full of corn, and every bit of forage for the animals. Then hunker down in the fortified hill towns and starve out the Romans. As their homesteads go up in flames, the cure must seem as bad as the disease to the Gauls. Yet their self-sacrifice astonishes and alarms the Romans.
Vercingetorix was trying to destroy the logistics of the Roman army. Just feeding these people is an enormous problem. And the farther Caesar goes against the Gauls, the longer his supply lines become, the easier it becomes to cut the supply lines and starve the enemy into submission.
With food supplies plummeting, the Romans will have only two options: stay and starve, or retreat. Caesar never retreats. In 52 BC, a courageous warrior named Vercingetorix calls upon his people to rise up against Rome and burn their barns and food supplies. By winter's end, the Romans must choose starvation or victory. But now, as spring returns, Caesar calls on his troops to rally and strike back against Vercingetorix and his people. Among Caesar's most trusted subordinates is Mark Antony.
Antony also has a lot of energy. He's a very brave soldier. He comes to Caesar with a lot of experience in the field, the kind of character that Caesar likes to have around.
They attack Gergovia, where Vercingetorix and his people fight a furious defense. The battle is brutal. Caesar, fighting shoulder to shoulder with his men, escapes with his life, but the battle is a disaster. Meanwhile, back in Rome, the political situation deteriorates for Caesar, even more as his enemies gather strength. The conservative Senate declares Pompey sole consul, placing an army at his disposal. Then, to add insult to injury, Pompey turns down an offer to marry into Caesar's family again. Instead, he weds a young widow named Cornelia, the daughter of a senator, Metilius Scipio.
Pompey probably wants to offset the prestige that Caesar is accruing. Pompey, at this point for years, has been sitting on his laurels.